Alright, it is time for yet another NHL Standings video. Let's get right into the update. So first, let's look at the Metro Division. Carolina is now back on top, going on a nice 4-game win streak recently. They do have a tough lineup of competitors coming in. They've got the Leafs, the Bruins, the Panthers, and the Wild, so it will be interesting to see whether they can start to create a gap between them and the Rangers, or if they'll still be neck and neck, because right now they are tied in points. Carolina has the go-ahead because of their wins. So for Carolina specifically, what has gone into increasing their performance lately, it's been the goaltending. There's no secret. Their games have been, a lot of their games recently have been 1-goal wins, like 2-1, 3-2, 4-3. Recently, in the last week or so, that's what it's been like. Before that, their offense was a little more consistent, but it has cooled off since then. So before you would see, maybe 4 or 5 goals a game. Now it's more 1, 2, maybe 3 goals a game if they're lucky. So they have been really, really tight. So their offense has not been hot as of recently. It's been their goaltending that has really stepped up, and it shows because you look at someone like Anderson. I mean, you just watch him play and you can understand why. But, even if you don't watch Carolina, you don't watch those games, he has been named Star of the Week a couple times. He's doing really well there, making headlines, making top plays. So for him, or for Carolina, it's definitely been Freddie Anderson. Now, for the Rangers, they have fallen back to second place. Like I mentioned, Carolina has a tough lineup coming up, and compared to the Rangers, who have an easier few games on the way in the next week or so, next couple of weeks, that's why I'm saying it's going to be interesting, because it can easily go the other way and see the Rangers reclaiming first with a cushion built on top of that for them. So if Carolina continues to ride their hot streak and Freddie's able to stay hot for them, then we can see them possibly staying neck and neck with the Rangers if the Rangers are able to take advantage of their opponents. So their opponents include the Canucks, Red Wings, and Sens, which, yeah. And there are a couple more difficult ones, like the Bruins and Caps, but they have those games where if they capitalize and take advantage of the easier opponents, it will benefit them. So if they're able to do that, then Carolina and them will most likely stay neck and neck over the next couple weeks. Specifically for the Rangers, their offense is doing okay. They've got about 3 goals a game. But for them, it looks like their defense and goaltending may be giving them some struggles here and there. It's really a mix-up for them, because some games they've got like 3-2 where their goaltending is able to keep them in it. But then there's games like 5-2 where obviously that's their offense, and then they've got big games that they drop like 6-3 where offense is there, but defensively the team struggled. So it's kind of a mix-up for them. They've got some games where their goaltender's able to hold them in. They've got some games where their offense just takes care of the whole game, and then they've got some games where their offense is just non-existent. So it's really a mix-up. There's not really any consistency that I see with the Rangers as of right now. And I say that because in terms of consistency, if you break it down, their consistency lacks with their defense. And I say that because they're literally scoring almost exactly 3 goals a game. If you look at their previous scores, almost every single game is 3 goals a game. So the offense consistency is there. You can almost guarantee that they're going to score at least 3 goals a game. They may need to start scoring a bit more to combat those defensive struggles, though, because if you're scoring 3 goals and you're either struggling to hold on to the lead and your goalie keeps you in it to win 3-2, or if you score 3 goals but then you get pummeled like 6-3, 7-3 because your defense can't step up and back those goals that you scored, that's where the issue is. You need to be able to work your defense to be able to, when you go up 3-1, hold that lead. Or, when you go up 3-1, hold the lead so that you don't fall 6-3. So that's what they need to improve on. They need to improve on those defensive struggles and kind of make their defense a little bit more consistent to complement their consistent offense that they've seen, or increase their offense to be able to combat their defensive struggles. So for the Caps, moving on, like I said last week, they're going through their season slump, and they've fallen to 4th place with the Pens jumping up into 3rd. Now, like I said with the Pens, at the beginning of the month, they got Malcolm back at the beginning of January. Jari continues to be amazing, and they are 6-1-3 in their last 10. So they're still running hot. I've been saying to keep an eye on them for quite a while. They have a few easy opponents too coming up, with their only tough ones being the Leafs and Rangers. And I'm thinking now that Carolina looks like they have it worse this month. They've got, I would say they have the toughest opponents this month in this division. So I would expect a lot of movement here, because, I mean, for teams like the Caps who have seen a slump, they, even though they have easy opponents, they could very easily start to fall off if they're not able to come out of this slump. So I would expect to see a lot of movement with a lot of teams having easier opponents compared to Carolina. We might see a lot of movement there. Now, with that in mind, they have dropped, the Pens have dropped 4 straight games. And before that, they were on a 6-game win streak. So, we will have to see which team comes back from the break, the losing streak team or the winning streak team. And that's why, again, I'm saying it's going to be interesting, because if teams like the Caps and Pens aren't able to come back from the break off of their slump and start performing better, we could see a larger divide start to form. But if they're able to come back against these easier opponents and change their narrative and start to perform a lot better, then we could see them start to close the gap and possibly jump above, if Carolina has trouble, assuming. So, again, specifically with the Pens, their wins have been big. Their losses have been tight with little offense. So that needs to pick up. And then I think they're good because they have the goaltending. So for them, I think it's just they need to be more consistent in their overall team performance. So just making sure that when they do have those big wins or those high-scoring games, that they have the strong defense to back them up. Just making sure that consistently as a team, they're more consistent, because when they have the big wins, it's high scoring and strong defense. When they have the tight losses, it's low scoring and poor defense. So they just all together, it seems like when their offense is off, their defense is off, and then when the offense is on, defense is on. So I think just consistently as a team, they need to be there more consistently. Goaltending, I think they're safe with, though. And then for the Caps, they do have a pretty big cushion between them and the next team, the Blue Jackets, being an almost 20-point difference. So I think they're safe for now, even if they do continue to go on a bit of a slide. I do think they are okay. Their offense has been there the whole time, scoring 3 or 4 goals a game. They have also dropped games to lower level teams, which is a bit concerning, and it speaks to the slump that they're currently on. So for them, I would say it's been just getting outplayed. I wouldn't expect them to keep it going for much longer, because teams like the Caps are built for like one slump a season, and when they start to get in that groove again, they're just gonna ride it, and they're gonna keep going strong. So yeah, they might be in a slump now, but I wouldn't expect it to stay. I wouldn't expect them to keep getting outplayed like they've been. All other teams in the division remain the same, except for the Islanders, who, like I said last video, I told you to keep an eye on them to possibly surpass the Flyers and Devils, and that is exactly what they did. They now sit in 6th, up from last place, and they look like they might even give the Blue Jackets a run for their money too. Blue Jackets are sitting at 41 points with a 4-6-0 record in their last 10, so they're obviously not doing too hot. The Islanders are sitting at 5-5-0 and 38 points. So even though 5-5-0 is not something to be too proud of, it is better than what the Blue Jackets are doing. So possibly expect to see them jump another spot. And it might be stating the obvious, but in their last few games, the Islanders, it seems the theme for them has been to lose to top teams and then win against the bottom teams. So, I mean, it's a good thing, because that means that they're taking advantage of the easier opponents. I mean, it's expected for them to go into games against Vegas and Carolina and Florida. It's expected for them to drop those games, or at least yeah, it's expected for them to drop those games, but it's a good sign that they're not dropping the games against the easier teams, because it shows that they're still able to hold on a bit more, which is something that the Blue Jackets have not been able to do recently. That's why I think they might start to make a run for the Blue Jackets spot. And all their games are pretty tight too. Even the games against the top level teams, it's a 1 or 2 goal difference. So they are starting to pick it up, and if they're able to keep those games against the top teams tight, if they're able to keep that going eventually, and if they're able to keep winning against the lower level teams, that'll help them build momentum and motivation and drive and all of that. They'll start to ride that, and then it'll start to translate into the games against the top level teams, where instead of a 1 or 2 goal difference, they go into overtime, or they go into shootouts, or they even come out with a win a couple times here and there. So continue to keep an eye on them. And with the Devils, they're just 1-9-0 in their last 10. So, yeah. Moving on to the Atlantic Division, these standings are exactly the same as last time. There has been absolutely no movement. And I think that kind of speaks to the difficulty of this division as well, because it's hard for teams to make major jumps like we've seen in divisions like the Pacific Division. So it does speak to the high level of difficulty in the Atlantic Division for sure. Now, I had said to keep an eye on the Bruins because they had been on fire in the month of January and the end of December. However, they have started to cool off of their hot streak a bit. They went from being 8-0 to being 6-3-1. So it's still a great record. I'm not saying that they totally fell off the map. It's still a great record, but they have cooled off a bit. And if you take a look at their last few games, specifically at their offense, it has started to dwindle down a bit, going from, the beginning of the month, they were scoring 5 goals, 7 goals, and then it went down to 4 goals, and now it's 3 goals, 2 goals here and there. So their offense has started to cool off a bit. They're not scoring as much as they were at the end of December, beginning of January. And we know that their goaltending has also been a bit tricky. So if they don't find a way to keep getting the puck in the net, then they may find themselves in some trouble. So they need to keep pushing that offense, or else I don't know if their defense and their goaltender is going to be able to hold tight leads, like 2-1, 3-2 type leads. So, yeah, there's a bit of cushion being formed now between the top 3 and the rest of the division. So you look at Florida, Tampa, and the Leafs. There's a bit of a cushion, or a bit of a separation starting to form. So it's really, if the Bruins want to stay in it, they're going to need to start finding their offense again. In terms of who to keep an eye on, I'm not going to go in depth on any of the other teams because they're all just doing exactly the same thing that they've been doing because there's been no movement. So while I would say to keep an eye on the Leafs, not being biased, they're on a 5-game winning streak. And yeah, they have dropped leads over the last few games, but if you look at the last couple games, they've had a couple huge comeback wins. They had that big 7-1 win against the Devils. So if those last few games are any indication, they have hopefully dropped those habits of dropping leads. So I will say to keep an eye on them. I'm also going to say to watch for that cushion that I just mentioned between the top 3 and the rest of the division to widen a bit more. So keep an eye on that point separation there. Now moving on to the Central Division, Colorado and Nashville, they remain up top, and the Avs specifically remain on fire with a 9-0-1 record in their last 10 games. I'm not really going to speak on the Avs because we know exactly where it's coming from. It's coming from everywhere. They have just one of the strongest structures I've seen on an NHL team. We know Kadri has been heating it up. We know Makar has been doing amazing, and everyone else on the team. There's nothing else really to say there. Nashville, same kind of thing. I think they mimic the style of the Avs, just on a smaller scale, I guess you could say. I don't think they're up to the caliber of the Avs just yet, but they definitely are. They're definitely on the same playing style, same structure. They're on the same path as them for sure. Now the Wild and St. Louis have swapped spots. The Wild are now in 3rd. They're also riding hot on a 9-0-1 record with a 6-game winning streak. Now, the Wild were the team, not to brag, but the Wild were the team that I said to watch out for in the last video, and they made a pretty big impact for themselves the last few weeks. They did have an easy set of games coming up the last time, which I had mentioned in the video, and they definitely took advantage of that to help reclaim their third place spot. Despite those several postponed games they had, I had mentioned that it would either hurt them or help them. Like they'd either kind of start to dwindle down because of the lack of playing time, or they would be able to keep it together and make every game a big one because they didn't play as often. And it turns out that not playing as often made them a lot stronger, and they're now just 1 point out of second place behind the Preds. So the Leafs, Panthers, and Carolina do highlight their toughest competitors this month, and the rest of the month sees also the Jets, Oilers, and Red Wings, and Sens. So I would say this month is an opportunity for them to continue on that hot streak and maybe build on the performance they had in the last few weeks of January. And also, no secret, their offense right now is on fire. They are scoring upwards of 5 goals a game. It's really rare to see them score less than 4 or 5 in a game right now. They are playing like how the Bruins were playing a couple weeks ago. That's kind of the style of play that they have resorted to right now. The Blues are still doing great with a 7-3-0 record. I think it's just that it's not that they're playing bad, the Blues. I think it's just that the Wild have turned it up more than enough to surpass the Blues, and the Blues just haven't been able to keep up with the same caliber of play, I guess you can say. Now, the Stars and Jets have also swapped spots in the Central Division, with the Stars moving into 5th and the Jets falling to 6th. The Jets aren't doing too great. They've got a 2-6-2 record, which is what allowed the Stars to jump above them. Stars kind of stayed average, I would say. It's just because the Jets started to fall off the map that the Stars were able to jump up. Now, for the Jets, it's the offense. They're getting about 3 goals a game, but they do have trouble finding those extra goals or that extra power, and they do have trouble turning it up once a team scores 3 or more. It's like they can't compete. If the Jets score 3, and the team that they're playing against only score 1 or 2, they are totally fine with holding that lead. It's once their opponents start to score 3 or more, they have trouble finding that extra drive or that extra power to score just like 1 or 2 more to jump above their opponent. That's their trouble there. And then Chicago and Arizona, they remain the 2 on the bottom. The Blackhawks were on a 4-game win streak, so I did think they were going to give the Jets and Stars some trouble, but they weren't able to hold on, which does make sense because the structure of teams like the Blackhawks, the Coyotes, the Habs, they're not built for holding streaks. They're not built for consistent play. So now moving on into the Pacific, top 3 teams have stayed the same. Both the Flames, so I'm not really going to touch upon them too much. Both the Flames and the Oilers have jumped above the Sharks now. The Flames are on a 3-game win streak, so keep an eye on them to keep moving up. Now, the beginning of the month was tough for both the Flames and the Oilers. For the Flames specifically, actually, for both specifically, they just got smacked each game. There's no other way to say it. They were getting smacked left, right, and center every single game. And then towards the middle and end of January, they started scoring more. They started creating larger leads for themselves. And now their most recent games have started to get a lot closer, which does indicate defensive troubles. Because, and this is specific to the Flames, they are still scoring 4 goals a game. And on average, they're still scoring 4 goals a game on average. And with teams like Vegas, Leafs, and the Ducks coming up who have a lot of scoring power, they need to get that defense in check. Their offense is totally fine. And this is similar to the problem that the Leafs are having, where their offense is totally fine. It's those lapses in judgment and those brain freezes where their defense starts to struggle. And that's when you see scoring 4 goals a game isn't enough because of those defensive struggles. That's kind of where the Flames are sitting at right now. And yeah, so now moving on, like I said, a couple standings videos back, if you go back a few videos, the Oilers and Flames went on their slides at exactly the same time. So it makes sense that they are starting to slowly climb their way back, kind of together. They're doing everything at the same time this season. Now, of course, what everyone is talking about, the Oilers got Kane. There will be a video posted on my thoughts about that. Spoiler alert, I don't like it. And I wouldn't like it for any team, not just because this is the Oilers. Make that clear. But watch the Flames and the Oilers these next couple weeks, because whether they succeed or not, obviously it also depends on the performance of the teams above them, they will definitely be at least trying to make a comeback in the next few weeks. Start to see a lot more offense. We're going to see a lot more offense and a lot more scoring. Like I said, the Flames are scoring like 4 goals a game. We're going to start to see a lot more offense. Also offense that is consistent. So keep an eye out for that. Now for the Sharks, they have fallen 2 spots to 6th. And their record shows that, especially compared to that of the Flames and Oilers, they just haven't been able to stay competitive enough to hold on. They've got a 3-4-3 record in their last 10. So they are only 1 point behind the Oilers. So like I said, depending on whether the Flames and Oilers succeed at their comeback, I would really keep an eye on this trio of teams, the Flames, the Oilers, and the Sharks, because they are all very close to one another, but also because the Flames and the Oilers, it's going to get interesting with them now. But keep an eye on the trio of teams, because their movement's going to be interesting in the next couple of weeks. Now for the Sharks specifically, they have had trouble finding the back of the net, and when they do, the games get too close for them, and they are either able to just hold on, or they can't keep up at all. And then you see Vancouver and Seattle are just Vancouver and Seattle. Canucks aren't too far back. They're only 2 points from the Sharks. So the standings in this division overall are really tight, because the Canucks with 46 points are only 11 back of first place. So really, like we saw with the Oilers, and it's the complete opposite of the Atlantic Division, but really like we saw with the Oilers and Flames, losing one game or going on a skid can really screw your spot in the standings with this Pacific Division, because it's still fair game. There's no cushions that have been built, aside from Seattle. Seattle, which is at the bottom, they're the only team that has a far separation. Other than that, it's still anybody's division. And Seattle right now, they're on a 5-5-0 record. It's pretty good for them, considering how their season has gone. But I don't think, again, they have the structure, like I mentioned before, with like the Habs and Coyotes and Blackhawks. I don't think they have the structure to keep them in it. And also considering from them to the Canucks is 12 points, I don't see it happening for them. I don't see any climbs. I really think they're going to finish in the spot that they're in right now. So those are all the updates for the NHL standings. Come back in the next couple weeks for another update.